Welcome to the Two Sons podcast. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I hope all of you guys are having a good week so far. How are you, man? How was the tour of the state of Arizona, the G-Man tour?
Yeah, the grand tour, if you will. Dude, it was awesome. We hit up Phoenix, saw a lot of Elena's family. Dude, we're blessed with great grandparents. Like, it is so cool. Like so many great grandparents that little G got to meet, grandparents that he got to hang out with. Aunts and uncles, dude, it's so cool. And then I had my third last ski
Oh, you
trip.
skied?
Yeah.
How was it?
Third last ski trip of the year. Dude, it was like skiing on mashed potatoes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Super slushy?
Super slushy.
It's been hot as shit.
Yeah, it
in
was
Arizona.
like 50 degrees on the slopes, so you can imagine what that does to snow. But
You
dude, they have
were in Phoenix on Monday?
Dude, I can't even remember.
Because it was 97 degrees in Tucson, so Phoenix might have hit 100.
Yeah,
I'm not
no,
sure
I think they were hitting hundreds. But it was still like, you cannot complain when you're out on the slopes. I was skiing in a t-shirt. Like people, like there's dudes that were like literally wearing like running shorts, and like that was it. Other than their boots, like people in swimsuits, like bikinis.
Spring skiing, man.
Spring skiing. It is an absolute vibe. There's this guy. He was like this older guy. He was probably like 70. And he was kind of like a hippie, you could tell. He's like driving his Subaru. He was with his wife, who's kind of like a hippie too, and just absolute ski bum vibes in the best way. And we're walking up because we had gotten there at noon, just because we had to drive there, right? And he looks at us, takes a fat rip out of his Jewel, and then he's like, "It's like skiing on grandma's mashed potatoes."
That's such a power move.
It was such a power move. It was awesome, though.
I don't
can't
enjoy
complain.
slushy skiing, but you're right. Like, there's no such thing as a bad day.
You go for the vibe. Like we were you know that upper ski lodge? We were having a beer there because for anybody that doesn't know, if you buy a ticket to Snow Bowl in the spring, they give you a $10 drink pass.
Yeah.
So like some days the lift ticket is like $19. So then they give you $10 back, so you're skiing for $9. But so we were out there, drinking a beer. And I felt like I was on the beach. Like the sun was out. People were just like literally sun tanning out there and just watching people come down on the runs. It was an awesome day.
Yeah. Arizonans, we live a different existence than most people around the country.
Yeah.
I'm very, very excited to see you, though, because I have so I watched the episode for the first time last night.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I rewatched some important elements of it this morning. And then I spent most of the day refamiliarizing myself this morning with the Aftermath trilogy.
Okay.
Which was a series of books that I read for one specific reason. Moff Gideon in our opening scene. So we get reintroduced to Moff Gideon, and he has a little conversation with his little mole that he's got on Coruscant.
Right.
And then he walks into a meeting. And he actually references the meeting as the Shadow Council.
Which was a dope name.
Yeah, well, and that's a name that I've heard before. Mm-hmm. So in references as the Shadow Council, and we specifically meet Brendel Hux, who is a very important character.
Right.
Those two names, Brendel Hux and the Shadow Council, are both very, very prevalent in the Aftermath trilogy.
Right.
So basically, and this is where I'm really thrown for a loop here, because I thought we got a massive hint that Grand Admiral THRAWN will not be making an appearance as an Imperial Remnant leader.
Oh,
I think we got a massive hint there.
Okay, and I hope that's right.
Yeah, and I hope so too.
Did you see one of our comments, like, "Not my THRAWN"?
Not my THRAWN.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I thought it was great.
I will absolutely be screaming "Not my THRAWN" if it ends up being that. But I like, Moff Gideon straight up puts it like, here we are again, and he's not here.
He's still not here.
And I think that, when I look at Admiral THRAWN too, just as a character, he strikes me as the kind of guy from a manipulative a point of view who would contact someone like Pelion and be like, "Hey, dude, I'm returning. Get the Empire ready for me." You know what I mean? Almost to mess with him or manipulate him in some way behind the scenes, even if he has some ulterior motive. And Moff Gideon, like he said, his character is, I think Moff Gideon is clearly among the Imperial Remnant the most powerful, influential smart man.
Yeah, he's got some clout. You can definitely get that vibe when he was in that Shadow Council.
Exactly. And he basically looks at Captain Pelion and is like, I haven't heard anything about THRAWN.
Right.
So I don't know.
He just puts him on blast.
Yeah, exactly. So so I took that as a good sign. And so I needed to familiarize myself with the timeline because the timeline is very confusing.
It is. And there's a lot of shifts of power. And that actually dawned on me, during Star Wars Week or whatever.
Celebration.
Yeah, Star Wars Celebration. When they're showing that timeline, it's just like the Empire's in control. Then there's like the New Republic era. There's like the High Republic era. Then there's like Dawn of the Jedi. And then there's the Empire. And then there's, it's like there's so many power shifts.
Oh, yeah.
So I definitely have to get, back into like the timeline as well, or think about it at least.
There's a very important timeline here, though, that's immediately after the Battle of Endor that I need to explain just from what I researched, because I think it kind of like hints at some stuff, but then also leaves a bunch of open-ended things that we need to figure out. So to be clear, the entire Mandalorian series takes place 5 years, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 5 years after. Yes, it is. It's 5 years after the Battle of Endor.
That makes sense.
The Battle of Jakku,
right,
which is what leads to all of the shipwrecks that you see that, the Millennium Falcon's flying through in The Force Awakens.
Right, with
the
Rey.
Battle of Jakku takes place 1 year after the Battle of Endor. Okay?
Huh.
There is a character. His name is Gallius Rax. He is a person, an orphan from Jakku that Palpatine actually found and brought back to be one of his main counselors. Think of him as on the similar level as THRAWN and Moff Tarkin and Vader. He's like one of the inner circle guys. There's like 6 or 7 people. Who's the one that's the Twi'lek guy who like has the staff?
Right. That's always like the council.
Yeah, he's another one of those guys.
Yeah,
but there's like
inner circle people who actually have like Palpatine's phone number.
Exactly. And then there's like the old man that you see in Return of the Jedi that's wearing the robes that's in the room. Like he's another one of those guys who's kind of like a Sith, like religious fanatic. Who's,
like they know who the counselor or the chancellor is.
Exactly. There's like 6 or 7 guys, and Gallius Rax is one of those guys. He is actually the founder of the Shadow Council.
Interesting.
He founded the Shadow Council with one purpose: to amass the Empire into one entity after it had fractured, and to get them all to Jakku. And then he was leaking information to the New Republic, telling them where they were
for the big
to
battle.
Lead to the big battle, so that specifically not Brendel Hux, but his son and a bunch of other children and some other things could escape to the unknown regions where Palpatine has been amassing the First Order. Right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's interesting on a couple of different levels, because that means what we're seeing in Mandalorian is the remnant of the remnant.
Yes. Yeah.
So the Imperial remnant has already been brought together and destroyed, basically, by Gallius Rax and the New Republic. And Gallius Rax dies, by the way, so he doesn't play any sort of role here. And then we've got like this other remnant. And so I found that to be super interesting, because like it makes some sense, because I vaguely remember in the final Aftermath trilogy some Imperial ships do escape the Battle of Jakku.
Right.
But this is like, it's kind of crazy, because as I'm watching the episode and as soon as he said Shadow Council, I'm like, oh, like I wonder if like Filoni's movie is going to be like Battle of Jakku. Like if we're headed towards this. And then I looked at the timeline. I'm like, no, that's 4 years ago. So now like I'm thoroughly confused as to where they're heading with this. And
like what's Rey up to? There's just like a lot of it's like, so I thought I knew more about the timeline until you were breaking it down.
Dude, it's confusing.
As you were talking about it, I was just like, oh my gosh, I have no clue what's going on.
It's confusing though.
Yeah, it's like it's literally a black hole. Do you think I think I'll know what you'll say, but do you think that's good writing, or do you think that's bad writing and Dave Filoni and everybody else trying to like mass forces in order to like put together what was a crappy storyline of episodes 7, 8, and 9 of the movies?
So I want to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
Like we need to wait till we see the finished product here, because this can still make sense. I mean,
I love that take.
The thing that's tough for me specifically is like, it makes sense that the galaxy would be extremely difficult to control without a military presence. This is like a fundamental argument from the Sith that I actually get, which is like, you need order.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is, in absence of power, there's all these like crime lords. Like, here's a pirate faction. Here's Black Sun. Here's, the Hutts. Here's this imperial governor that's governing this space. Here's the Pikes. And then the New Republic kind of has this like weak presence, but they can't even. They actually say in the previous or 2 episodes ago that the pirate one, they're like, we can't even protect the mid rim.
Right.
Like they so in the absence of any sort of military power, there's all these factions, and that's what makes, and like that's where like the New Republic, it's like they're kind of idiots.
Yeah, that they're a little bit weak because they're okay. I'm sorry, but in Star Wars Galaxy, you really can't just follow the rules, right?
No.
Like you've kind of got to break the rules a little bit in order to truly be a powerhouse. The galaxy is just too big, man. Like the galaxy is unfathomably large, right? It's kind of fun to bring Star Wars universe into like our world, right? And I, from what I understand, with the whole entire Ukraine war and Russia, I'm pretty sure Germany had to have a hard talk with themselves, and they're like, should we increase our military power, which they hadn't done in the past due to obvious reasons, because people are like,
I think there were treaties in place too that limited that.
Yeah, so like they were even having to have that conversation, like real life, like, hey, like, do we need to increase our military power, right? So like that happens in planet Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the Aftermath trilogy, if I'm not mistaken, they start to break this down, but what is the resistance?
Yeah.
What happened?
True.
Like there's in the sequel trilogy, there's the Resistance and there's the New Republic, and they're separate factions, and the reason why is literally because the New Republic demilitarized.
Dude,
They
what is the
demilitarized.
resistance in this case?
So the
Do
resistance.
you think your timeline's off?
No. So what happens is Princess Leia actually like goes to the New Republic and is like, dude, so this is actually fast forwarding.
I see.
A little bit
Okay, so
Leia basically looks at hears about the First Order making their return to the galaxy. This is now way after the Mandalorian. But what ends up happening is she goes to the New Republic and goes like, "Hey, we need to militarize. The First Order's coming," and they're like, "No, we're not going to. We don't believe in the military." So the Resistance was essentially like a bunch of rich people that were in the New Republic donated ships and military to Leia, and she had the Resistance that she then fought against the First Order with.
Which makes sense because that timeline mainly takes place in the Outer Rim.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like the New Republic and their military being unwilling to put their foot down on this stuff was what allowed these little factions to arise.
Well, and here's where I'm a little bit confused too. So Project Necromancer.
Yes.
It was mentioned during the Shadow Council, and obviously that probably pertains to Palpatine and maybe, but like how does that pertain to like essence transfer? I'm having a hard time putting things together. So we know that Palpatine has like cloned himself, right? And like the lineage of clones that Palpatine had was like actually like far greater than I'm comfortable with. Like his like grandson clone like had Rey, right? It was like super convoluted, right? And then so like Project Necromancer like has something to do with clones, it seems like, but like necromance, like that's like the dead, like to bring back the dead, right? So like he hasn't died really because he did an essence transfer. So like that, I'm a little confused as far as like that as well.
So so the way that I looked at that, do you remember the speech from Moff Gideon right before they attack the Mandalorians, where he's basically talking about bridging or bringing aggregating the 3 best qualities, what the cloners can do, what the Jedi can do, what the Mandalorians can do. Right. So I believe that Brendel Hux, because again, Brendel Hux's son is Hux from
General Hux.
General Hux, right? So he has a connection to the First Order out. And so we got to think like at this point in time, Palpatine is alive and orchestrating things from the unknown regions, right? Probably not telling anybody he's still alive because, Supreme Leader Snoke is the fake leader. But there was a contingency plan that Palpatine had in place that Gallius Rax executed, which was to fake the death of the Empire but lead to this existence out in the unknown regions. But the Project Necromancer, like, we don't know what it is. It could be him working on behalf of Palpatine. It could be something completely different. But it does involve cloning to some extent, right?
Yeah, we know that.
Then we have, obviously, Moff Gideon, his obsession with Beskar and everything involving Mandalorian culture. Yeah. And then we have the Jedi, and this is where I think Dr. Pershing comes in some of his...
Dude,
in
I'm
some of his
completely
experiments
following
with the
you.
Force.
Yeah.
So
this makes sense.
It's all very confusing.
And maybe why Grogu's so important compared to other entities.
Well,
Yeah.
I think what he was a very strong in the Force being that Brendel Hux was trying to extract, presumably the midichlorians or his blood to try to infuse. We see on Mandalore, Moff Gideon is running his own little cloning operation, right? So we've seen this concept before in Legends, but it's in for those of you guys who are video gamers, it was in the Kyle Katarn storyline involving Dark Forces and Jedi Knight and Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy and all these different video games. And in it, at one point in time, there is a Jedi who falls to the dark side, whose name is Dasan. And again, this is all not canon, but Dasan, with help of another fallen Jedi named Tavion, actually ends up producing clones that are Force sensitive, and they're called Reborn. And essentially, like, you in the video game are constantly fighting Dark Jedi, many of which are just these clones that are imbued with the Force.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated topic because I am currently reading Darth Plagueis. And during Plagueis...
You're just going
I'm all in on Star Wars right now, man. So, like, it's a good time to be all in on Star Wars, by the way.
It's a great time to be alive.
And again, as I've said before, I listen to these audiobooks as, like, my escape from basketball. So, like, Plagueis is, like, in his kind of, like, mental meanderings in the beginning of the book. One of the many things he discusses, because he's obsessed with elongating his own life, right? And basically what he talked about at one point in the book was like, injecting people with Force sensitive blood or trying to transfer midichlorians doesn't work because of the fact that the body actually like rejects it.
Which is so funny because that's like so classic like human experience. Like, okay, like what if we just inject some blood into somebody?
This will work. Yeah, it's a terrible idea. But like, so clearly at some point in Legends, like Plagueis and the galaxy had not figured out how to transfer Force sensitivity. But then by the time we get to Kyle Katarn, he actually does kind of figure out how to do it. So like, they're hinting at that, and Moff Gideon has this idea of like restoring order to the galaxy from the standpoint of having basically like Beskar wearing Force sensitive clones.
Which would be badass.
Yeah. And so I think that's kind of, so when I was watching originally today, I was all like, okay, what is this? Is this associated with the Battle of Jakku? What's going on here? Like, I don't get it, blah, 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 blah. Here's my theory as of right now. After the Battle of Jakku, a certain number of Imperial officials escape, right? And we actually learn that they're still capable of manufacturing and producing equipment. So they basically rebuild the strength of the Imperial remnant after the Battle of Jakku, in large part because the New Republic is sitting on their hands like a bunch of idiots, right? Right. And he's reestablished the Shadow Council, and I think THRAWN is somehow manipulating things behind the scenes, or he either THRAWN manipulated Captain Pelion, or Pelion actually is lying about THRAWN to try to motivate the group and keep them together in pursuit of a larger goal. I see. But Moff Gideon essentially, and he hinted at this in his meeting, he's like, perhaps it's time to look to new leadership. He's trying to basically shoehorn himself in there as the leader. My guess is it's going to end up being we're building towards a big villain, in this case Moff Gideon, with an Imperial remnant with these super powerful Beskar soldiers that are also Force sensitive, right? So like, and I think that's kind of like what we're heading towards, but it's important to remember that like this is separate from the Battle of Jakku stuff. It is separate from all of that stuff. And I mean, but then like we also have these other Dark Jedi characters in Ahsoka. I'm really curious to see how they come. Like there are so many moving parts here. Yeah. And again, like I would assume Filoni's movie is years away. Like
you'd have to
at be, 3-4 years away.
Long time to make a movie. Yeah.
So we're probably going to get 2 or 3 seasons of Ahsoka, 1 or 2 more seasons.
Which is going to be all in on THRAWN most likely.
Yeah. And THRAWN is probably going to end up being a foil to Moff Gideon.
I would hope so. And that was my big question and it's still the same question that we talked about last week is like, do they do THRAWN right? I think the only way that they could do THRAWN right at this point is if he just steamrolled what is Gideon and everyone else in the Shadow Council.
Yeah, he makes sense as a different type of character because who are our characters right now? Like Mon Mothma is currently in charge of running the New Republic, and she's more of a political figure, right? Like Bo-Katan is going to end up being the leader of the Mandalorians. Yeah. And then like there is no real military leader. We do know from Aftermath trilogy that Admiral Akbar is still active. I mean, Admiral Akbar, I believe, is actually killed in The Last Jedi, right? So we know that he survives through all of this. So there are military leaders involved, but I think Grand Admiral Thrawn, like basically being a good guy that fights against Moff Gideon would be awesome. And like this is where I think it gets cool too. It kind of falls in line a little bit with what we know from new canon and what we know from the Thrawn books. So,
what do you mean by that?
For instance,
Jason, I am following you and loving every single second of
dude.
this.
You're
like
Star
a
Wars
crazy
has me
person,
very
like
excited.
putting like pictures up on their wall, like
the meme with the dude who's like kind of going like this, and he's got all the stuff on the wall. And that's how I kind of feel. Right
just
now.
like,
and I could literally be wrong about all this. By the way,
I'm loving what you're putting down.
So what do we know about the unknown regions? We know that the Chiss Ascendancy is out there.
Right, and the Grisks.
We know the Grisk are out there.
Yeah.
And we know there's all these other like smaller nations. What else do we know about the unknown regions?
Hyperspace lanes are jacked up.
Yep.
I don't know.
We also know that that the First Order is currently assembling out there.
Yeah.
So the Grisk, look, and here's the thing. For fans like you and I, we would enjoy the Grisk. And I'm not saying that there's an end to the Grisk. The end of the Grisk could be something that we end up seeing in more Thrawn books. Mm-hmm. Like we could. I wouldn't be surprised if we get another trilogy of Thrawn books that take place post escaping with Ezra. And what he did in his in that time period before we run into him with Ahsoka, because there's a big chunk of time from the time the Purgles take him to now 5 years later.
Right.
Like there's a lot of time there, and so I think we'll end up actually getting an explanation from the Grisk in an alternate type of a situation with books.
Maybe less of a storyline than we originally thought.
Well, less for live action.
Yeah.
And
okay. I see what you mean.
So let's
mainstream action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And let's think
less
of it like this.
mainstream.
The Grisk are short. We're literally told that they're short in the books. Okay. And they're non-militaristic. They are militaristic.
Well, yeah,
but
they're
the
militaristic.
primary source of their power is actually manipulation. So
sure,
that doesn't bode well for the big screen. You know what I mean? It's more of a book type of villain, right?
Yeah.
But let's say Thrawn, in his pursuit of defeating the Grisk, happens to hear about or learn about somehow the First Order. At that point, Thrawn would be. What would Thrawn do if he discovered the First Order?
He'd probably try and infiltrate it or kill it.
He would view it as a threat to the Chiss Ascendancy.
Yeah, exactly.
Would he not?
And the reason why I'd say he would infiltrate it is because it would be a threat, right?
Exactly.
He'd try to run up the ranks like he did with the Empire and get in control. That way he can manipulate it.
Or amass some sort of counterforce to beat the First Order.
Sure, just to kick its ass.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I actually think that it's very possible that Grand Admiral Thrawn rejoins the galactic scene to basically try to figure out the best way to combat the rising forces of the First Order, which would be in large part like potentially having to destroy what's left of the Imperial remnant or to achieve control of their resources. And maybe if he does take control of the Empire, that's what he I'm not sure the direction this is going.
No, I agree.
But like there's some sort of connection there between the fact that Thrawn and the First Order both are from the unknown regions, that Thrawn is not involved with the Imperial remnant despite the rumors from Captain Pelion.
At least so far. Yeah.
And we already have kind of a guy that plays the Thrawn role on the Imperial remnant side of things, which is Moff Gideon, Giancarlo Esposito, who's like a legendary villain actor. Like I doubt that they would put like two of those guys on the same side. You know what I mean?
True. Dude, this is deep.
This is deep.
And I think so. One thing that you and I always have to keep in mind is how does this look from a mainstream standpoint?
Yeah.
Because like unfortunately and fortunately, I guess, like that's always going to be a part of Star Wars. Like, can your and I wives sit down and enjoy a Mandalorian episode just as much as we can? I think it would be a storyline that people could follow regarding Thrawn that could be simplified, maybe not into the depths that you and I know him, like with the Ascendancy books and the other books, but maybe just this simple, which would be Thrawn was a previous admiral of the Empire, didn't like the way that things were being run, and now he wants to be a good guy. I think it's possible to simplify that enough, and to bring him back to fight like Gideon or whomever, to where like the general public would kind of be able to follow that.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, one simple conversation would be enough too. Ahsoka finds him. They sit down.
Yeah.
Hey, dude, like, what the fuck? You know what I mean?
Ezra's like, hey, Thrawn's not that bad of a guy.
Yeah, just hear him out. Just hear him out. Right?
Thrawn is actually a great hang.
Yeah, dude, we have so much fun together. And then like I could just see Thrawn like looking back at Ahsoka and being like, I was given a mission to infiltrate the Empire by the Chiss Ascendancy.
Right, and by the way, this is what the Chiss are.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah.
To try to get as close to Emperor Palpatine as possible so that we would have because we viewed them as a threat to our survival. End of story.
Do you think they'd ever bring in the Chiss Ascendancy into all this?
Absolutely.
Dude, that could be so cool.
Because here's the thing, dude. The Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock Holmes, the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes, the Idris Elba as Luther, like the whole like I'm a genius and I'm operating at some higher mental plane than everyone around is like a proven television thing that works. I think Thrawn is going to be a character that we see a lot of content surrounding. Yeah. And that would inherently imply that the Chiss Ascendancy would be involved.
Well, and it's a great opportunity, Chiss against Grisk. Right,
yeah.
Like that could be so cool.
Can
you imagine the space battles?
Or Chiss getting involved against the Imperial... Because like that, to your point about the easily digestible content,
right?
The Grisk is kind of like, I'm not sure, but like, dude, stormtroopers and Star Destroyers and
people know
like,
that shit.
People know that shit, right? So like...
Which, by the way, I can cuss now because Lent is over.
Yeah, fuck.
Just kidding.
We're fucking done with Lent.
That's what it's all about, right? Jeez. No, I'm going to try to not cuss.
For Jesus, all that matters is getting past the date.
That's totally what that's about.
Just kidding.
No, I know you are.
But all I'm going to say to kind of tie a bow on my whole conspiracy theory thing.
No,
this
is not conspiracy theory-esque. Like this all makes sense. I am completely following you.
So that episode and the drop of the Shadow Council and all the related storylines. And the hint that Thrawn is not involved with the Empire, all of that leaves so many open-ended things that I am so excited to figure out.
Yeah, and the big question is do they do a good job? I think they're going to do a good job. I think they're really taking their time finally with Star Wars. I think they're finally talking big picture Star Wars where they have more than 4 people in a room trying to
tie all these things together.
Yeah, so and honestly they have to now because of how botched the movies were.
So I want to spend some time talking about the actual episode, but the one last thing I want to say though is I do, and again this could go a completely different direction, but I do think that everything surrounding this particular Imperial Council is
the Shadow Council
is separate from the Emperor.
Oh, you do.
So I think the first iteration.
This is where I might disagree with you, but continue.
So let me just break it down. And you tell me what you think. So the first iteration of the council was founded by a disciple of Palpatine for a specific purpose. To trick those people into thinking they were amassing the power of the Empire for a strike against the Republic. Okay. Then he destroys them with the Battle of Jakku. Gallius Rax actually dies. A bunch of children escape to the unknown regions that end up being disciples of the First Order. And a small contingent of the Empire escapes. Okay. Then the Shadow Council reforms. I'm guessing that Captain Pelion was actually the leader because he's the one who's throwing out Thrawn there and kind of putting it together. That kind of seems like a separate iteration. And the reason why I think they're separate from the Empire, or I should say from Palpatine, is Palpatine's purpose was already served by the first Shadow Council and everything that took place in the Battle of Jakku. Also, everything that Giancarlo Esposito's character, Moff Gideon, everything that he's kind of going after with this new council kind of seems separate from what anything Palpatine would believe in.
It seems way smaller scale.
Yeah, Palpatine would have no interest in an army of Force sensitives. It goes against the Sith imperative.
True.
He also is obsessed with planet-killing weapons as his sort of like peacekeeping thing. He wouldn't give a shit about like a bunch of Mandalorian soldiers, basically that could use the Force and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like I think that they are, and it makes sense because this is the trappings of operating within a existing timeline. Is like, even if they win, it doesn't have any bearing on the First Order returning 20 something years later, right? So like all this really is like a storyline for characters like lower level characters like Ahsoka and Bo-Katan and Din Djarin and Moff Gideon and Grand Admiral Thrawn to kind of have their kind of hash out session. Yeah. That's my theory right now.
The only thing that would confuse me with that final part of your theory is the whole entire like Palpatine not knowing about this as much is they openly talk about Project Necromancer, which feels very Palpatine-esque.
Yes,
right.
It does.
So that's the only thing, and also the whole entire Hux lineage is still there. So there has to be some way in which General Hux can do his thing, and obviously there would be conversation with the Hux family members, I believe.
Yeah, and I don't. Is that our first mention of Project Necromancer? Can you think of any other mention?
So I looked into it, and it seems like it's the first mention. And if anybody knows more than we do about it, please give us some knowledge on it. But when I looked into it, that's all I could find. It literally like referenced this episode of The Mandalorian.
I'll be really curious to see what direction that's going. I want to spend. Man, I don't know how much time we could spend on it, but like when this season is over.
Yeah.
And I think with each passing season, because now that we know from Star Wars Celebration that basically, that Mandalorian, Boba Fett, Ahsoka, all these things are intermingled.
Right.
They happen in the same timeline. Even the Skeleton Crew takes place in the same timeline, which is coming out, I think, next spring, right? So we have a lot of stuff here to tie
Bad
off.
Batch 3 also.
Not in this timeline, right?
Prior, right? It's like leading into the whole entire.
Just
prior.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But
it's the start of like the whole entire like Camino cloning and end of the Caminos. End of the Camino cloners. Beginning of the Imperial. Advanced Science Division.
Yeah, the Imperial obsession with cloning.
Yeah.
But like, what I'd like to do is just as we get to those points, have some deeper conversations surrounding where we think this timeline is kind of tied together.
That. We can get a crazy whiteboard. We can put some pictures up. We can get some red string and connect some dots. It'd be great for you. You'll get it all out, Jason.
Maybe just a bunch of cocaine.
You'll get it all out. Like, we'll stay up for like 24 hours straight before we like really dive into things.
I want to be experiencing the paranormal realm while discussing this.
Jason just full blown paranoid.
Physician-assisted psychedelics.
Yeah.
So, but going back to the episode.
Yeah.
It was...
that's what's interesting about this, too, is like, it's so cool that there's... I don't know how long we've spent so far, maybe 20 minutes.
Ish, yeah.
Talking about just everything that could be just because of like one short scene of the Shadow Council.
That opens up so many. Yeah.
And like on a side note, it's so cool that, so how your mind would have been blown, or at least mine would have been blown, if we didn't already get the Ahsoka trailer release and the mention of THRAWN. Like, how stoked would you have been if they like just hinting at THRAWN in The Mandalorian? Like, that would have been really cool.
Yeah. Well, and you and I would have immediately been like, look at Moff Gideon. Moff Gideon said, I don't know anything about Grand Admiral Thrawn. We'd be like, yes.
Right. So like to my point, it's like, it's so cool that we can just go deep into the sticks, right, about Star Wars, and we haven't even talked about this episode yet. So like,
which was literally insane. We saw a mythosaur. We saw a dark saber.
Oh, you think that was a mythosaur?
Of course, that was the mythosaur.
Really?
That was the mythosaur.
You think that was the mythosaur?
I'm 1,000% sure that was the mythosaur.
We need to watch. Okay, we'll check it out. I don't think it was. I think it was like a little crystal weirdo beast.
That was the mythosaur.
Really?
They did like a long... There was like a scene where Bo-Katan like stared at it like this and was like, oh shit.
But no one was like, holy shit, there's a mythosaur. Like, don't you think everyone would have done that?
Well, but here's the other thing too, like...
Jason's
none
really
of them
off
have
his
actually.
rocker,
No one's seen the mythosaur except for
they
Bo-Katan.
don't know. Well, yeah, but they have paintings of what it looks like. But anyways,
before you leave today, I'm going to rewatch that scene.
All right, we'll do it.
Because I want you to see it.
We'll do it, and one of us is going to look like an idiot.
Yes, and it's going to be you.
Probably so.
But
Dude,
we have the mythosaur.
Potentially.
We had Grogu in a mechanized walking suit.
Yes. Okay, no, let's just talk about that.
Speak.
Yes. So I texted one of my close friends because she loves Grogu. And I was like, you're going to love this episode. And she's like, is it Din Djarin shirtless? Or is it naked Din Djarin only wearing his helmet? And I was like, no, but you're going to love it still. It was so funny. But yeah, so Grogu, with the ability to say yes and no, was enough for me. If only that was in this episode, I feel like I would have been stoked, right? So like all of a sudden IG-12, previously IG-11, is now manned by Grogu, which is great for the storyline too, because now all of a sudden Grogu's incredibly mobile. He's no longer in his little floating bassinet thing, and he can kind of talk. And it was so funny when he was walking up to like the merchants, and he's like grabbing the fruit and then holds it high enough for where Mandalorian Din Djarin can't get to it, and then
like,
Din is just like, this isn't working.
This
for
isn't
me.
working for me. Well,
Dude,
at one
that was
point
awesome.
he infiltrates. Well, infiltrates the wrong word, but he basically separates two Mandalorians fighting. Like actually,
I know.
and like grabs them and separates
Just
them, and
says
is like, no,
No.
like so, like he's like legit mobile, strong, all
Yeah.
those different things,
and relatively coordinated.
Yeah.
And what's cool too is he's just walking through Navarro, and he's like, yes, just because he's so happy that he can walk.
So much fun.
Dude, it's so funny. It's so funny. Yeah, so like that's in it. We get to see the Mandalorian paint job on the underside of that light
so
cruiser,
cool.
Reminiscent of what we see in THRAWN, right?
Yeah.
So THRAWN has his insignia.
Wingale foa maoksa.
My man, under his starship, which was like just so cool that they even do that in Star Wars, because that's what badass people do when they have a giant starship. They fly it over cities, and the people of the city are like, "Oh, who is that?" And they're like, "Oh, it's the Mandalorians." They've got a mythosaur painted on the underside of it. Like, how dope is that?
Cool.
And just like, again, just like a little detail in Star Wars where they're just doing it right. Like they're doing it right now.
And it looked like a fresh paint job, obviously, because
Yes.
it was that scene was definitely really cool.
It was so cool. It was so cool.
We got the Mandalorian factions and a little squabble.
Yeah.
We got the appearance of the mythosaur, obviously. Then they go down into the mines, or actually not. This is actually separate from the mines, because
It's like the armory.
they went to the Living Waters the first time. This time they went to where the Great Forge was.
Mm-hmm.
But they end up running into Moff Gideon, who's clearly established like a full-blown base on Mandalore.
Yes,
where he's
that thing
been
was
mining,
huge.
presumably mining Beskar.
Yeah.
Refining it. He's in the Great Forge, literally.
Yeah.
He's refining Beskar. He's creating the armor not only for Dark Troopers but also for these White Trooper things, which those kind of more or less seemed like what his ultimate goal is, which is basically like Beskar wearing stormtroopers that can fly, that can use the Force.
So those things were so cool because they looked like clone troopers, like Phase 2 clone troopers, and it was kind of a missed opportunity in my book where they didn't have the Death Watch there, but there's still a chance where some of those troopers could be remnants of the Death Watch.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, and who is it? The armorer basically says like the Death Watch doesn't exist anymore. They fractured into a million groups.
And that's why I thought when I saw him cruise in, I was like, oh, it's the Death Watch finally. And then it wasn't, and I was a little bit shocked on that. But those dudes are sick. Mm-hmm. Those and then Gideon,
what do you think of the
course.
Praetorian? The Praetorian Guard.
Oh yeah, so that's why that's the other thing. I'm glad you brought that up. That's why I still feel like maybe Palpatine's still involved, because that was very Palpatine-esque. Like we've always seen those guards around him. For them just to roll in deep and
they did
and
discuss
just do their
them just
thing.
like Imperial assets, though. Like they were just mentioned casually, like inventory alongside TIE
Yeah, but,
interceptors
like,
and TIE bombers.
That's true. No, that's a good point too. I don't know. It just felt very Palpatine-esque still.
Yeah, and again, like I'm not saying one way or the other. And here's the thing with Palpatine too. Like Carly's out of town; she's at a business trip, so not last night because I had to work last night. But the previous night, I rewatched The Phantom Menace, which I freaking love.
I watched it recently too.
Yeah,
It's funny.
and it was so
like 2
awesome.
nights ago.
Yeah,
I finished it. We
might
probably
have to-
watched it on the same night. Didn't
we
realize.
need to do a Phantom Menace breakdown episode.
Yes.
So Palpatine is like manipulating everything in that episode.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the secret, and I don't want to dive too far into this because I'll save it for when we kind of like talk about that. But having read Darth Bane and then Darth Plagueis, I'm about like a third of the way into Darth Plagueis. They haven't even introduced Palpatine yet. But like through all of that, like there's so much about the Sith secrecy and like when they're going to reveal themselves.
Uh-huh.
And like it's so cool, like just seeing like how not only is Palpatine like actually referring to himself as a Sith to the Trade Federation, but he's also like Darth Maul is like, at last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge. Like it's such like a cool moment in Star Wars where like after 1,000 years of believing to be extinct, like they reveal themselves. And this is actually an important part of the Acolyte when they do the Acolyte. Like that will end in all likelihood very similarly to the second Bane book. If you guys remember in the second Bane book, there's a team of 5 Jedi that go to destroy Darth Bane and Darth Xana, and they all die.
They do.
It is very possible that the Acolyte ends with whoever comes into contact with the Sith being destroyed.
Yeah.
And them tying off all the loose ends, and that ending with the Sith basically walking off into the distance safe. Also,
hand in hand.
And Acolyte actually takes... And I'm glad we're hitting this because we wanted to hit Star Wars Celebration stuff anyways, but Acolyte actually takes place only 100 years before. And to paint a picture, it's Darth Sidious, it's Darth Plagueis, who's a Mun who lived a very long life.
Yeah.
And then it's Darth Tenebrous, the Bith, and Darth Tenebrous had a Twi'lek master. So it's very possible that in the Acolyte, the Sith master who's in charge of whoever this like Acolyte is either Darth Tenebrous or the Twi'lek master, which is something that I'd be very excited for. And we know there's connections there because there's a Wookiee Jedi in it who is apparently Buryaga, the Jedi that we've been reading about in the High Republic books, which is really cool.
And that's what's cool. It's like it seems like they're finally doing their homework, right?
Hell yeah.
And the deal is like if you're not using stuff from Legends, you're missing out because like Legends is incredible. It's great source material, great source material.
Exactly. And I do think they're going to tie a lot of this stuff back together. But to your original point, though, about the Praetorian Guard, like, and their connections to Palpatine, like, in Phantom Menace, as things were changing around him, Palpatine was always one step ahead of it. So, like, for instance, like, he wanted Queen Amidala to sign the treaty. But then when she didn't, and she ended up on Coruscant instead, he's right there. He's like, actually, you know what you should do is push for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum, and then Padme like zags on him and goes back to Naboo to attack the Trade Federation, and like somehow like Palpatine actually weaponizes that to turn the Trade Federation into one of the leading factions of the Separatists, and like he's always like taking every.
Oh yeah, and we see the same thing happen in Bad Batch.
Exactly,
the final
that's
episodes.
Such a great example.
Yeah. We see him just completely just roll with the punches and then just do something that's incredibly a power move. Right?
Exactly,
and to gain even more power.
And he would absolutely be aware of everything Moff Gideon's doing, and it is very possible that he is connected in some way. The point is we don't know, and that's what I love about this is like they're again. I hated the sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
But at least they're putting in some effort to like kind of tie some of this stuff together to at least try to salvage it as best as possible.
And so I was almost getting giddy like listening to you talk about that stuff, which sounds like really weird, but I'll explain. You and I take Star Wars so seriously, right? So we felt like they completely botched it by episode 7, 8, and 9. This feels like they're redeeming it. And
at least trying.
And it to me it feels like they're actually doing a pretty decent job about it. Like we were making jokes about like cooking shows where they hand a chef like 7 different terrible things that don't go together and they're like, hey, make something good out of this, right? And it feels like they're actually on their way and they're mounting an effort that could potentially do that for us, to where you and I might be able to watch the newer movies with different context and enjoy them way more.
At least somewhat more.
Like light space.
The scale's always going to bother you.
Well, the scale's always going to bother me. Sure, there's going to be a little things.
The
light speed skipping is egregious.
Lasers,
There's certain things. Yeah.
Are you mad yet?
No, I'm just shaking.
The code breaker.
No. But like, it seems like they're mounting somewhat of an effort to do right.
Yeah.
There are so many cool aspects of that episode that like we really can't like probably dive down into. But one of the things that I thought was really cool is all of a sudden there's like a third remnant of Mandalorians, right? Like that was just like a really cool little touch
that survived on the surface of the planet.
And then not only that, but like as they were after they were in the Forge and following like the Stormtrooper hybrid guys, Did you notice as they're going through the caves how it just got like a little bit more imperialistic, like as they went deeper and deeper,
a little more austere, a little bit more,
yeah, until all of a sudden they're just into like the depths of a giant
imperial
facility. Like seeing that was like super super cool. One thing that we have to touch base on is Paz Vizsla, and his sacrifice. Like that scene is one of my favorite all-time Star Wars scenes. It's probably in the top 15, I'd say.
I liked it a lot too.
It was so cool because he sacrifices himself, and what was neat is they could have had him die, right? He was completely overwhelmed, and he didn't die. He like completely used up his giant blaster to the point where it was like melting in his hands,
literally.
Almost. And then he goes to hand combat, and then just kicks everybody's ass, and it seems like he's gonna live. I'm just like, did that man just live? And then that's when the guards come up, and that scene was really cool too because something that Star Wars does a really good job on is they don't make battles or hand-to-hand combat too long when they're not supposed to be. Like if you think about how long a lightsaber duel could actually last before someone dies, it's really not that long. Mm-hmm. And the perfect example of that is when we see Obi-Wan finally kill Darth Maul for the second time, really. And like that lightsaber battle was incredibly short. And as soon as Vizsla came in contact with the guards, like that battle was incredibly short too.
Yeah, there's three of them too.
There's three of them. He completely overwhelmed him.
And they could penetrate his armor.
But the dude still held his own and was just a complete badass. Like it's just incredible fight scene. One of my favorites.
It was a very cool sacrificial lamb type of scene. Yeah. And Paz Vizsla was a really, really cool character, like that they built up the legend of him throughout the 3 seasons. That was definitely fun. I wanted to ask you specifically about the scene where Bo-Katan kind of breaks down what happened in the Purge. Oh yeah, that was another monumentally important scene in this episode. For those of you guys who missed it, basically, or for those of you guys who want a quick refresh on what we're talking about, basically, she says, "I did surrender."
Yeah.
They told me that if I did, that they were going to spare all the remaining Mandalorians, and so the deal was I had to give Moff Gideon the Darksaber and surrender, and they would let everybody live. And he betrayed me and killed everybody.
Yeah,
and he's like, she's like, I thought it was my only chance to save you guys, and it ended up backfiring.
Yeah, and it was really cool too because we got the token, which was we understood the storyline of the Darksaber a little bit more and how that got passed from one hand to the next. Yeah. Like, how does Gideon get the Darksaber? Well, it makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. It's because Bo-Katan made a bad deal and she got screwed over.
I really liked the scene too where Din Djarin basically, like, because Din has never had a purpose beyond the Creed. Mm-hmm. And he served the mission to get Grogu, and then he basically started treating Grogu like a foundling. And at one point in time, he viewed it as he had to return it to his kind. But then after that, he became a foundling in their covert, and there was no larger purpose, and like even above and beyond the point to where like Bo-Katan's talking about the living waters, and he's like, whatever you're saying, I don't care. I just need to get in this water, get back to the armor so I can be redeemed.
He's kind of a simple man.
Yeah, he's a very simple man. Which is why it makes sense that he ceded power to Bo-Katan. But there's this really cool scene at the front of the ship where he basically goes like, just so you know, like, I don't follow you because you have the Darksaber. Yeah. He's like, I follow you, and I can't remember the exact phrase he used, but basically he's like, I follow you because you're honorable.
Yeah, yeah.
He's like, in short, he wants to fight for her.
Right.
And basically he was saying to her, like, don't worry about the clans and staying together. Mm-hmm. He's like, it was almost kind of like he was saying, like, you're the first person in my life that I've been willing to lay my life down for. Yeah. I bet you all these people would be willing to do the same. It was a really cool scene. I really enjoyed it.
No, it was incredibly cool. Like it was profound hearing him say like, "Hey, like I don't give a crap about the Darksaber. By the way, no one from my clan does either. Like we just want to do this because it's the right thing to do." Like that was incredibly powerful. Like there are so many cool aspects of this episode. Like I'm dying to watch it again. Like I'm absolutely dying to watch it again and see your fake mythosaur.
So the end of this episode involves the rest of the Mandalorians escaping. Yep. And presumably we see all of Moff Gideon's fighter squadron headed up to go take on the fleet.
Yes, which, by the way, you were correct about. A huge spaceship battle above Mandalore.
Yeah, well, it was kind of predictable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if on the way out they interact with the Mythosaur again and Bo-Katan gets involved there.
Oh.
I am, as soon as we're done recording here, I'm going to take Luke to my
School me.
television and school him really quick. So do you have some time to talk about Star Wars Celebration?
Yeah. Really quick before we get into Star Wars Celebration 2, just a quick little shout out to Moff Gideon's new getup with his Mandalorian helmet.
It has like a crown on it.
It has like the crown. It's like very like Darth Maul like. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really cool.
You just have to.
It was a phenomenal episode. I'm extremely excited for the end. I just left that episode with my head completely spinning.
And it was just because of one little segment. Like,
one little scene.
Yeah.
And I want to, like, again, I don't even have my thoughts organized on that yet, really, and we will dive deeper into that after the season.
And I'm sure after even next episode, we might know more. I don't think we're really going to know what's going on until we see Ahsoka.
Mm-hmm. So with Ahsoka, a couple of specific details that we missed in our trailer reaction.
Yep.
Ezra makes an appearance.
That's a big one.
As a hologram.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we do know that he is in fact alive, but it further hints at the idea that because basically the actor who played Ezra made a statement on Twitter where he said it was fun playing a hologram of Ezra Bridger for the show. Like, and he kind of hinted at it like it was all he did.
Yeah.
Now, apparently, and I'm not familiar with him, but apparently the actor is a relatively famous actor. And
he must look a little bit like Ezra in Rebels.
He does.
I presume, yeah.
And my guess is that Ezra and Thrawn are going to play a much bigger role in a different show.
Not even Ahsoka.
Not even Ahsoka.
Okay.
I think the primary protagonist and antagonist in Ahsoka is going to be the Dark Jedi and his apprentice and Ahsoka. That's my guess, but we'll see. It's kind of, think of it as
you're talking about flashbacks. You thought Thrawn's main part in Ahsoka was flashbacks.
I don't think we will see Grand Admiral Thrawn wearing Imperial getup in the present day at all. Wow. I think we'll see a couple flashbacks of him, but that's it.
All right.
Which makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. But I think it's going to be more like Luke Skywalker at the end of The Force Awakens, where like we get this brief kind of like touch on those characters that kind of hints at them in the future. And my guess is that what's going to end up happening is Ahsoka, in her pursuit of Thrawn, is going to end up running into Sabine. Yeah. And in the conversation with Sabine's going to tell her, I've been speaking with Ezra. Ezra's with Thrawn. They're working together. He's not involved with the
two
Empire.
best friends that anybody could have.
The two best friends that anybody could have, and no one has to work. And then the attention will get focused over to the Dark Jedi. That's my theory.
Okay.
But I am incredibly excited for that series. Irrationally excited for that series. It centers right around my birthday in the month of August. It's after the basketball season, so we'll be able to kind of focus on it from a podcasting standpoint. I am just beyond ecstatic about that series. And apparently there was... Oh, and by the way, Disney. Cut it out with the secret trailers, man. I'm sick and tired of it.
Where they just drop a trailer.
Apparently, they dropped another secret Ahsoka trailer that was elongated and actually showed Grand Admiral Thrawn's face. I'll show you a picture.
What?
Yeah. So, but then
I think I did see
then
that,
the Acolyte.
actually.
There's apparently this dope Acolyte trailer out there. I sent you the chunk of it. I have searched far and wide. I've probably gone to parts of the dark web to try to find this.
Jason's computer's infected because he's trying to find this trailer.
Like they're doing this epic kung fu scene, and then the camera guy just kind of goes like this. You're like, what are you doing? Like, was there dark troopers in the arena? Like, get that shit out of your hands. Yeah. Like, it's freaking crazy to me. And you can't find those anywhere. And like, I get it. You have some reason to promote, like, you know, people attending those events, but it's like, dude, like. All just you're doing is killing me.
We can't go. I think it's in London, right? It's like we can't go to London. Oh. Jason and I can't go to London. Like let us see these. Yeah.
So I hope we get to see that specifically at some point relatively soon.
I think I did see it. I think I did see that picture.
Oh yeah, it's kind of interesting, but I am annoyed, genuinely annoyed at this stupid.
And then there's going to be even a Visions too. Like, did you watch? You watched all the Visions? Actually, we talked about.
Yeah, we watched all the Visions. Were entertaining. There were a couple of them that were weird, but I did enjoy them.
Well, and that's kind of what happens when you get into like different anime type media. You start to get like kind of stuff that maybe you and I really aren't that used to.
That was
you know
the
what I
photo
mean?
that I saw.
Okay, I did see
You
that.
did see that one? Yeah.
He's got a little bit softer facial characteristics than I would prefer.
We're going to let it slide.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
This is what we're going to do.
Yeah,
We're going to be
I got
supportive
you.
of
We're gonna
Thrawn. It's live action.
We're Thronians, the Thrononites.
It's like, and you know what?
We
It's
can't ask for too much.
As long as Lars Mikkelsen actually nails the acting, it'll work. It's kind of like
As long as they don't complete.
Bo-Katan's kind of an interesting looking, but she just nails the acting. And it makes it work.
I think we'll be cool with it just because we're going to be super, stoked just to see Thrawn on the live screen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Visions look good.
Visions looks cool.
There are a lot of Dark Jedi action,
Mm-hmm.
which was up my alley. We're getting a second season of Tales of the Jedi. That's awesome. Tales of the Jedi was some of my favorite Star Wars content ever.
It was the upbringing of Ahsoka.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Acolyte for a second.
Okay.
So I am also irrationally excited for this one. So I've been joking with Luke lately because I've been reading all the Sith books again lately, and they're so different from the High
Jason's
Republic
wife
books.
is like calling me. She's like, "Have you seen Jason lately? Like,
He's very
we
dark,
don't know where he is.
Why is he in the other room chanting?
Yeah, and the lights are off, and he just has this like audiobook going, but he stops it a lot and does like some weird chants.
So
He hasn't eaten in 2 days.
The High Republic books have this like very like pompous Jedi attitude kind of thing going on, and then the Sith books are very like very like the best way I would describe them is ruthless, but like ruthless in like a practical sense. You know,
Yeah.
like the Sith they're portrayed as evil, but really what they are is just survivalists.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
Realistic survivalists. And because like even Plagueis, I'm reading Plagueis, like Plagueis, I don't know if you remember this book. It's so damn good. It's so damn good. So like he kills Tenebrous and he conducts some of his business. And then he goes back to his this secret retreat place where like all these people in the galaxy come together to like mock the Republic, and there's like hunting excursions and stuff. And he senses a dark side presence, and then he looks out in the distance, and his sensors kind of pick up something, and he's like, hold on. So he goes out there by himself while his party kind of thing is going on, and it turns out to be another Bith named Darth Venomous, who was a second apprentice that Darth Tenebrous had taken and actually tasked him with killing Darth Plagueis. And it's so funny because one of the funniest things about this is like the Sith, like even after Bane, it's like Bane's like, actually Xanas sucks, I'm going to replace her. And then it's like, and then
Xanas is like, no, Bane sucks. I'm going to kill him.
And then like there's like the random Sith that turned to the light side and burnt up a bunch of stuff. There's another Sith that tried to violate the rule of two. So like and at one point Plagueis in his like kind of like thoughts, he's like, he's like, even with Darth Bane's rule of two, like not very many Sith actually obeyed it. It's funny because like the Sith at their core, they're just too corrupt.
They're just too corrupt. They're too evil.
Too corrupt to handle it. But like, so Darth Venomous is there, and it's so cool because like he actually goes to he actually says like, my name is Darth Venomous. And like, if you remember, the name Darth, as we learned from Bane, is very much like a proclamation of power. And then literally like Plagueis just gets mad and he's like, we'll find out.
If you're Darth or not.
And he dominates that dude in the jungles of this planet. And then he actually keeps him alive and takes him to the he beats him, and Venomous like pledges his allegiance, but the Plagueis is like, no,
I don't need you.
He's like, eat this flower. The flower like incapacitates him. He takes him back, keeps him alive, and he conducts his Force experiments on him. But in Venomous's ship, he actually ends up discovering like a list of Force sensitives around the galaxy, and like he goes one by one and tracks them down, and like some of them he kills because he views them as a threat to the grand plan. But there's like another one, like a guy who's winning gambling matches.
Yeah, I remember him.
And he kind of goes like, here's the deal.
He's kind of like a playboy. And
And he's changeling. So like he goes to all these casinos and changes races.
Dude, So
there's
so much going on in
that
that series.
He goes to it's another different audiobook guy, and he's the best.
Really? Best?
He's the best out of the other.
Better than Mark Thompson?
I think he might be.
Whoa.
And like he's got like this epic voice that kind of works for a Sith novel.
Okay,
but
all right.
Anyway, he ends up the gambling guy. He actually goes to him. He's like, here's the deal. you can do this one more time. And you're going to take the winnings and you're going to disappear.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, if you don't, I'm going to kill you. But like, that's a great example because like Plagueis is like, yeah, like he doesn't need to die.
Sure.
Like he just like, I don't need, and Bane talks about this a lot. Like he literally says just killing for the sake of killing is to fulfill sadistic pleasure. It doesn't actually serve any purpose. Like
right.
The
He's so hardcore evil that he doesn't even kill people when he doesn't need to. Right, because it doesn't serve a purpose, like for his evilness.
Exactly, I
like that sounds backwards, but it's true. And like in the book, like when you're reading, you're like, "Oh, that actually makes sense." I think I was on my honeymoon when I was reading those books.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
dude, dude, so good. We'll have to. We're gonna really try to pump up the content because we need to bridge this gap between Mandalorian and Ahsoka, and I really want to dive into the movies.
Let's
and the books again.
next pod we'll have like a little list of books we're gonna get to in the order in which we're gonna do it. That way our viewers can do it
kind
with
of
us.
And read along with us. Yeah, I would love that, and I enjoy rereading the books as well. I always pick up new stuff. But as far as the Acolyte goes, that I really enjoy the concept of the Sith, and apparently. So they've been branding this show as a combination between Frozen and Kill Bill, and
Frozen the cartoon.
Yes. Now, but hear me out.
With Elsa.
But it's exactly. But it's based on the two sisters.
Okay.
So there's basically two sisters in the show, and one of them goes to be a Jedi, and one of them gets picked up by the Acolyte, or by the Sith, and that's kind of like the premise of the show. So that's all they mean by Frozen is like there's the two sisters.
Okay, so they could pick any franchise with two sisters in it, but they picked Frozen, which is a kids
Disney cartoon.
Disney
for
cartoon.
the darkest show that you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
But like what I really like about it is I'm so like this is. So they've done several versions of this kind of idea throughout Star Wars, which I really like, which is like its interpretation. So for instance, like Andor is kind of like this gritty kind of like political drama, right?
Right.
Excuse me. And then like The Mandalorian is like kind of that space western vibe, kind of like the older movies, and like basically. The Acolyte is supposed to be kind of like the martial arts movie version. So they've employed a bunch of the people from Shang-Chi and the Eight Rings or whatever, which was that
sick. I did
Marvel
not know
movie,
that.
which was and I watched that Marvel movie. It was amazing.
Okay.
And like
I'm stoked.
and then Kill Bill, if you've seen Kill Bill, is like one of the coolest martial arts movies of all time, with samurai fighting and stuff. So like
which works for like lightsabers and,
absolutely
and the Star Wars universe.
Could not because like there's this thing that happens all the time in these martial arts movies where like they'll be like doing something and someone will be like paw, like hit someone in the chest and they'll just go flying.
Yeah,
right?
it's like that person has the force. Like, for sure.
Exactly. And that concept and then obviously the implementation of the lightsaber combat. Like I am so down for this series. I'm so down for the focus on the Sith. I'm so down for the dark element. I am just like, oh man, what a good time to be a Star Wars fan.
It's what a good time to have a Star Wars podcast
with
your best friend. I'm dead serious. Like Jay, I'm so glad we did this. This is one of the best ideas we've ever had. Next to like getting
we used to literally do this by our wives.
I know, and they'd be like, "Can we please not?" We'd be like in the hot tub with everybody, and we'd just be like, "Oh, Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars," and our wives would be like, "Are you kidding me?"
Which we don't do anymore.
Get in the hot tub. Oh no! Talk about Star Wars.
Well, after the hot tub incident of I'm just kidding. We
don't
talk about Star Wars around our friends and family anymore, which is
worked.
Good.
Yeah.
I think it's probably time for us to call it as far as today goes. But what we'll do is there's so much more to get into. Yeah. And we will find time.
We'll talk big picture even more, especially after one or two episodes from the Mandalorian,
which is season finale next episode.
Dude, I'm so bummed. Mm-hmm. Every single time I see that ticker go up, it's like, episode 7 of season 3. It's just like, oh my gosh, like we're getting close. It's sad.
It's mid-April, so May, June, July, August. So we're 4 months. So we basically got to cover 16 episodes, roughly 16 weeks before we get to the Ahsoka. So a lot of time for us to dive into a bunch of this stuff. Yeah. Not to mention we have a High Republic book to break down that we both just finished reading,
and we could even get into some of the old movies.
Which I would really like to do.
Yeah, me too.
All right, guys, that's all we have for today. As always, we sincerely appreciate your support. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys next week.
Thanks a lot.